All right, folks, it's 12:05. Sorry, I'm a little bit off pace today, but let's get started. And welcome to Point A. This is where high performers accelerate their family happiness without sacrificing their business success. I'm Coach Kieran Diorio, and welcome to part 2 of Ending Endless Overwhelm Live. Check out part 1 for all the basics, but in that lead-in, both last week's live information as well as the lead-in video that's out there on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that good stuff, we ultimately landed on our need to say no, or using our superpower of saying no in any of its flavors if we're ever to step out of the headwinds and crushing energy drain of endless overwhelm. Remember, overwhelm is a natural part of a high-performance life, right? If we have the reserves we need to handle it, overwhelm is going to be a lot like catching a cold. It's going to be unpleasant, it's going to be draining, but it's also going to be temporary, right? Where we get in trouble is when we get in these loops of endless overwhelm. That's much more like having a chronic disease. It's always there. It's always draining. It's always impacting or interfering with our potential for success, our results, and our happiness. So it's something that we really, really must be conscious of. We must take steps to break that cycle so we can enjoy natural overwhelm when it comes up, maybe even make hay or get dividends from those times in our lives and stay out of that repeating loop of endless overwhelm. No bueno there for sure. So if you checked out that most recent video, I talked about high performers being especially susceptible to endless overwhelm. Why? Well, high performers tend to have exquisite coping skills. I think I used the term weapons grade coping skills, an incredible capacity to rationalize, forgive, cope with a ton of things. And these are the skills that high performers use to get results in any conditions, despite long odds, despite setbacks, despite those crushing blows. High performers tend to be able to cope with things, and that carries them through and gets them results. So this is a good thing. It's a great skill, a great capacity to have. But what's wrong with a good thing, or what's bad with a good thing here? Well, high performers may also default to coping because it's so powerful. And when we default to coping, we actually end up tolerating and prolonging things that eventually wash us overboard. Coping, it's a powerful skill, but it's going to tend to foster and fester, I like to say. And for the things that tend not to go away, it's going to nurture these things rather than address them. And over time, these can be huge impediments to our success. It really can be something that prevents us not just from our results, which are super important, but ultimately our joy and satisfaction with life. So very important thing to understand that about ourselves if, in fact, we do find ourselves coping excessively rather than addressing the things that are in the way. In that most recent video, I think I point to this giant monolith. It's a big rock out in the wilds there. And we tend to cope with things like that. And because we do, they tend to continue to stay in the way. So it's important that we harness that awareness, and important that we harness our power of saying no. There's a lot of information about saying no out there, and it's all good stuff. There are a lot of peripheral things we can say no to, and that's okay as well. But my challenge was, and remains, let's say no. Let's stop coping with those things in our lives that are always there, that are always interfering, that are always impacting our ability to succeed and enjoy life. And actually, I had somebody reach out to me in advance of today's live performance with a great question, and with their permission, which I have, I'm going to use. I'm not going to get in detail, but I'm going to use what they shared as content for the rest of today's cast here. Somebody reached out to me, and I'm just reading the email. It says, "Hey, I cope like a champ, and I know that feeling. Maybe you do too. For high performers, coping is very much a badge of honor. It's a toughness, right? It's an ability to adapt. It's ability to survive and even thrive in tough conditions. It's a lot of our spirit and a lot of our strength as high performers. So I get that, and I see the pride in being able to cope with things. It's a good thing. Not knocking it at all. But again, this person said, "Hey, I cope like a champ, but my situation at home is always in the way." And this person, this is a very big deal. This is something that was going on at home that was very much an overhanging issue. And it was such a big deal that it had them really just an inch away from being overwhelmed all the time. So, as this was always going on in the background or as the backdrop to whatever they were doing, something would come up and bam, that tips the scale. All of a sudden they're overwhelmed. And as we talked before, that drives us into some of our lowest potential plays, our lowest forms of energy, and just continues the cycle. And then, in fact, very much squelches our potential for success. So, not a good place to go, not a good place to get tipped into all the time. And the question was, what do I do? And hey, if this is resonant with you, you're not alone. This is extremely common. It's very much part of the human experience, especially for high performers. So what do you do? Number one, this person had already done the first step. They became very aware that they were just simply coping with something that it was time to do more on, right? The next step when we find ourselves at this place is to really get aware of the benefits and the costs of just coping. And there are advantages and disadvantages to every approach. So I'd like to be very even-handed and really explore not just the price of coping, but also, what are the benefits? What's coping doing for us right now? And in both cases, the price of coping, in this case, and the advantages or the benefits of coping, we're maintaining status quo. Okay, and there may be times where that makes sense, but for this person, it had become such an issue that the status quo just wasn't going to work anymore. In fact, it was becoming an obstacle or impediment to success and joy in this person's whatever facet of life. So it was very much an overarching issue for them. So once we evaluate the benefits and the costs of just coping, it's important that we look at this next step. And I want to be really careful with this, but if maintaining the status quo is the benefit of coping, we're going to be forced to wait for some kind of catalytic event to change the status quo. And that happens. That's normal. And that's okay. It does happen. But if we're no longer willing to pay the price of coping, it's up to us to open our eyes and be the catalyst for the change that we need in our lives. And when I say open our eyes, I say that instead of taking the wheel, because the fact of the matter is, in this case that someone brought to me, or in many cases, we are in fact driving the car. But when we cope, we're doing so with our eyes closed. And if we're going to be the catalyst, if we're going to bring our own catalytic event to bring positive change, we've got to open our eyes. And then once we do, we can take that car to where we really want it to be. So that step of taking ownership, taking responsibility, becoming the catalyst that we need to break the status quo and end the overhanging overwhelm is that next step. And for this person, that was the play that needed to be made, and the time to do so was now. And in this case, it wasn't a slash and burn thing or a take no prisoners kind of attitude to addressing the status quo. Rather, it was very much being honest about the fact that there were a lot of things unsaid in a relationship. And this person said some things that had to be said. So there are right ways and wrong ways to do that. If you have questions, contact me. I'll be glad to offer some support there. But that first step of saying the unsaid was the play, and is the first step to getting out of that endless overwhelm cycle for this person who reached out to me. So I just want to share that, and I want to thank that individual for writing in and giving me something very real to talk about. If it's resonating with you, know that it is very real and very common, and something that we all face. And I'm just going to wrap it up with that and just share or hold things off with what I've covered here today, and just encourage you first to be aware that you're coping and know that it's probably a powerful skill for you. But if it's creating something that is always in your background, if it's that skunk that's under the table, maybe it's time to be the catalyst in your own life and maybe say what's not being said to foster the change that you need to happen next. So, hey, I'll leave you with that. Again, I'm Coach Kieran Diorio, pointacoachingandconsulting.com. You can reach me at 724-331-9263. Until then, we'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.